Hi, my name is Mike Welch and I'm at Plumline Solutions. Today we are going to be looking at the Payroll Setup screen and Direct Deposit Setup screen. In this video, we will talk about the Payroll Setup screen and its options, and the Direct Deposit Setup screen and its options. As with all modules, the setup screen for the payroll module is the first thing to complete. In Payroll Setup, go to the first tab, Payroll Information. The current calendar year will default from the period number of the module. If you are on a non-calendar year, then set the year to match the calendar date. Current fiscal period should match your other modules. Last batch number can be all zeros or any other number like you see here. Periods to retain timesheets. These are the entries from time entry or time and dollar entry. Pick a higher number now. You can always reduce it later. No matter what this option is set to, records are only deleted when you run delete payroll detail. Quarters to retain checks. This would determine how far back you can print checks on the check register. I would expect this to be for multiple years. Years to retain employee history would determine how far back you can go to see summary numbers in employee history. Typically this would be for many years. This information is kept to support W-2 data and future employee or government inquiries. Years to retain deduction history would determine how many years you can go back to see a deduction setup. You would review this under the deduction history screen. You would want to keep this long enough to keep an employee or a government agency an explanation of the calculation if requested. Deductions don't take up much space in the database, but can clutter when sorting through the deductions and looking for a particular one. Of course, this is the case with any data. Periods to retain QuickSend advice slip stub detail. If you are not using QuickSend, then you can set this to 0. Selecting the Direct Deposit checkbox allows you to set up direct depositors. This option lets you send an ACH file to the bank for deposits as well as to print actual checks. Retain check for reconciliation controls whether or not the software retains a record of all payroll checks that have not been cleared. When you close the payroll module in General Ledger, checks that have not cleared are not deleted from the database and are retained regardless of the periods you are retaining checks. And checks that are cleared will be deleted when the retention period is met. If retained checks for reconciliation is not selected, the software deletes the record of all payroll checks at closing when the retention period has been met. Selecting Special Government Reporting allows the entry of information into the Government Reporting tab, which is included in the W-2 electronic media. If we go to that tab, you will see that the fields on this tab have been activated. Even if you are not going to use government reporting, you will still need to have something selected for kind of employer. So you could select None Apply, which you can see is selected here. In order to be able to select this, you will first have to have Special Government Reporting selected on the Payroll Information tab. So if we go back and unselect Special Government Reporting and go back to the Government Reporting tab, you will see you are unable to change anything on this tab. Only when you have Special Government Reporting are you able to make changes to that tab. Once you have chosen a kind of employer, you can always go back and uncheck the Special Government Reporting if you are not planning on using the Special Government Reporting option. Allow multiple company time entry. This allows timesheet entries to other companies that have relationships set up in intercompany maintenance in the multi-company module. However, an employee's pay can only be calculated in their assigned company. The process will create the intercompany transactions when the check is kept. Allow liability vouchering. This function will provide an opportunity to enter a vendor ID on a deduction. Then a voucher can be created automatically for the deduction amounts that have been withheld so that you can pay the proper tax authority. Create AP liability vouchering at payroll batch release allows this process to happen automatically and then to go ahead and release that voucher batch or not. It is probably best to not release now, so you have a chance to review it in the Voucher and Adjustment screen in the AP module. So we will select Release Later. Note that if you select the option to allow liability vouchering, but don't have the Create AP Voucher Batch at Payroll Batch Release selected, there is the Create Liability Vouchers Adjustment screen, which is right here in Processes. This screen allows you to do the same function with much more flexibility in the deductions you choose, check date range and period date range, and other options. Now back to the Payroll Setup screen. The Allow Multiple Checks per Pay Period will allow more than one check at the same time for an employee. This functionality might be used when you are giving a reimbursement check in the same check run as regular pay, or you might want to give a bonus check separately from the regular check for greater impact. If we open the time and dollar entry screen, you will see where you can enter the check sequence. When you enter a timesheet, you would select which check sequence you want the earnings to appear on. After payroll calculation, you will get multiple checks for the employee in the same batch. Check sequences can be set up in the check sequence screen. Now let's go back to the Payroll Setup screen to the GL Information tab. The checking account sub-defaults in the check printing or direct deposit advice slip screen that can be changed there. The expense account sub-defaults when setting up an employee but can be overwritten. GL Posting option. This option specifies how payroll transactions are posted to General Ledger. If posted in detail, each individual payroll transaction will be posted to General Ledger. If posted in summary, the transactions will be summarized by account within each payroll batch entered. You might want to make this posted in detail initially so you can see all the transactions. Then if it is more detail than is wanted, you can change this to posted in summary. It's usually better to start out saving too much and then reduce later rather than the other way around. The option to send employee ID to GL only controls time entered in project. No transactions originating in payroll will contain the employee ID in the GL Tran table or employee ID table. However, the ID table in the GL Tran table will be updated with the employee ID. The employee ID field displays in the Journal Transaction screen in the General Ledger module, but the ID field doesn't unless you would customize this screen. For the Disposable Earnings tab, these settings are used to determine the maximum amount of an employee's disposable earnings that can be garnished. Garnishment deductions are often based upon disposable wages. Disposable wages are gross wages less certain deduction amounts like federal, FICA, state, and so on. This information can be used to determine the maximum amount of an employee's disposable earnings that can be garnished. Now let's go to the Workers' Compensation tab. Workers' Compensation Setup determines if you can create workers' compensation transactions from payroll. There is a process screen that you run to create GL transactions for workers' comp expenses. This screen is the Generate Workers' Compensation Premium screen, which you can see right here. While the workers' compensation batch is created from payroll, the batch record appears as a GL batch and is viewed in the Journal Transaction screen in the General Ledger module. Now let's take a look at the Direct Deposit Setup screen. On the Default tab, there are settings that will pop up when you add a direct depositor. The defaults can be overwritten, but are meant to make data input more efficient. The distribution type default setting is in effect where there are multiple bank accounts. Either a fixed amount or fixed percent of earnings will go to the secondary account, with the remaining going to the primary account. The Will Pay Rule default goes into effect when there is not enough money to follow your distribution settings. You choose which account to fund first. On the ACH File Setup tab, the first 5 lines of information comes from the bank requirements. Enter the appropriate company name. Your ACH file name can be anything you choose. You may want to locate the path to this confidential file in a folder that has limited access by other users. These checkboxes, the first 3 are requirements from your bank. If the ACH test option is selected, you can create and send an ACH file that will contain the first 5 employees with numbers of all values set to all 9s. This file is sent to the bank to test the file format and communication functionality. Always notify the bank first that this is a test file. The Communications Options tab points to software that will open the audit report that displays after the advice slips are printed but before the ACH file is kept. Typically this is set to the location of notepad.exe or something that can read the audit report so that the numbers can be verified before the ACH file is sent. Direct deposit setup does not need to be completed until you are ready to set up direct depositors. An explanation of the ACH file records is available under the Help topics. Go to Payroll Direct Deposit and Appendix A ACH file format. And this will show you the format of the ACH file. Now you are ready to complete other payroll setup screens such as work locations, earnings types, pay groups, and workers' compensation codes before entering your employees. I hope this video was helpful.